What's going on? Good people. It is the Bad Wolf. Once again, I want to thank you for supporting, watching, sending the donations to those people that applies to. Everybody's welcome. Thank you for the people who've been supporting the Wolf Pack. Thank you to the people who are supporting the new Bad Wolf channel, the Bad Wolf Media channel. Thank you to the people who've been supporting the Bad Wolf Unlimited channel on YouTube. And thank you to the people who have been supporting the new website, jamesclovett.com. Thank you. Um, a lot of people think just because you're on the YouTube that you're just, wealthy or whatever else. No, I mean, at least not me. All right. So I still have to hustle, still have to make money. I still have bills to pay, just like everybody else. So thank you for those people who have supported me in all of those ways. Um, I've definitely done some controversial stuff, and you know, we we have learned together, and we're going to keep learning together. So, for those people who like other topics, like things on the news or how I personally feel about, politics or whatever else, join me over on Bad Wolf Unlimited on YouTube. Okay. For those people who want to see me talk about things going on in the news, that join me on Bad Wolf News Media, okay, or Bad Wolf Media Channel is the full name of it. So the Bad Wolf Media Channel. Both of those are on YouTube. Thank you to the people who are over on TikTok who supported me over there. I've been trying to develop the Instagram one. I've got like 3 or 4 channels over there, but I don't put up a whole lot of content. So I guess I shouldn't expect a whole lot of people to find me. So apologize for the dream look. It's just because my finger probably had some oil on it and it's all fuzzy now. So I'm your dream man. Yeah. All right, guys. You guys know me. I'm just the man in black, the bad wolf, and I appreciate each and every one of you guys out there. Um, let's get going. So this particular video is about Judge Dale. Now, I've made 2 other videos on 2 other packets of information that Judge Dale's put out there. So if you don't know who Judge Dale is, from my research, Judge Dale appears to be a retired female judge. I could be wrong. But nonetheless, this information is out in the public domain. I have these files for free download on my website. They are not mine. I do not sell them. I give them away for free. Judge Dale has apparently no problem with anybody using this material and content. So this is out in the public domain. So free and fair use for the information being presented. That being stated, some people say Judge Dale's not real. Some say that they are, whatever. At the end of the day, it's about the content itself. And I'll tell you this, as I've gone through this over the years, the many different packets, I've used some of these things. I've given you guys some of these things. And it continues to be damn near flawless in the information. But as always, whether it's my information, work, or somebody else's, do your own research and vet the information, vet the person. Don't just accept something because somebody made a video. There's a lot of people out there, male and female, who are mentally delusional or agents of the state or agents of the government or whatever else, putting out disinformation. I mean, they pay some 3-letter agency out there even pays YouTube to put sovereign citizen movement underneath my videos. So these people are very passionate about what they perceive to be that. But here we know there's no such thing. There's no standing in law for a sovereign citizen. But there are people who operate against the government, but that's not what we do here. We are patriots. We are state citizens. We are nationals of the United States under 8 U.S.C. 1401, generally A, and we are exerting our rights. So any 3-letter agency or police or judge who's against our rights, freedoms, and liberty, you or they are a traitor to these United States of America or the several states. And our government has a duty and task to weed those people out, even within its own ranks, and deal with anybody in whatever way that they deem fit or personally, if needs being, for any threat, foreign or domestic. Don't tread on me. We're not the enemy. The enemy is calling us the enemy. Believe that. With that being stated, let's get into the video. As always, guys, if you see anybody using any of my materials or calling me outside of my name, please use the report button for that particular person, video, or YouTube site. But as always, I do not tell you this information. Any of it is absolute fact. We are not licensed here. We are studiers of the law, private, public, foreign, international, constitutional, civil, criminal, family, all of that. Because nobody out there is trying to teach us all of this. So I'm bringing it to you guys. Let's get into it. All right. So I'm going to share the screen. Hopefully it's already popped up and ready. If not, it will be. Take us in, Captain. Okay. Once again, I'm sending positive energy out to each and every one of you guys who hear this. If you are somebody who believes in that, then I send it to you. And if not, that's okay. May whatever God you believe in have mercy on your soul. All right. So another group did some editing in this particular document, but it is not their document. And I have seen some other people on YouTube do a video on this document, but it is once again not their document. It belongs to Judge Dale, who wanted this information put out there. So without further ado, let's get into it. So the title of this one is going to be The Great American Adventure, Secrets of America by Judge Dale Retired. I think there's like 4 of these documents. Okay. And this says includes all the important must-read information, Bankruptcy of America 1933 on page 36. So they go into a prologue, the bankruptcy, the Roman trust, which I've talked to you guys about, credit and debt, the legal process, courts, criminal law, how to deal with citations, summonses, lawsuits, divorce, foreclosure, and then lastly, the so-called sovereign citizen article, where they basically try to put this out there. But this has no standing in law. It has no standing in law. Okay. So let's get a lesson in fraud. And let's see here. First, I want to make sure that sound is on. Okay.
Due to an historic perversion in expert mind programming labeled as Babylonian slave driving techniques, which has been adopted and employed by the United States government, few citizens realize that America is not perceived it to be.
So keep in mind, just like I always say with any guest speakers or whatever else in the bottom comments and sections and details, these are not my or Badwolf Unincorporated's direct opinions or then thoughts. We are just studying information. And generally, when they say the United States government, they really mean the corporation. But remember, there are different divisions in the government, okay? So we're not saying all of the government is bad, at least I am not, but there are some divisions that are clandestine in there and their various operations. And some are doing, good stuff that we just don't need to know about on this level, even though I know about a lot of it. And then there's the ones who are doing bad, and there's the ones who are doing great. So keep that in mind. All right. So you do your own research and develop your own thoughts on this information. Let's get back to it.
B. What they. Elephants are gray, but not all gray things are elephants. This expose hopes to reveal to you the great adventure and some secrets of America, but not all, because there are too many, such as, America is not a free or constitutional country. Factually, it isn't even a country. America is a privately owned French corporation, and its motive of operation, known as politics, government, courts, laws, currency and commerce, are merely the byproducts of several greedy, vivid, and intellectual imaginations belonging to the royal and elite of Europe and controlled with the aid of their foreign agents and slave drivers who act in America under the protection of the Foreign Sovereign Immunities Act.
Okay, so a lot of powerful stuff being said in here. They talk about like bankers of a particular background. And actually, I was raised by Jewish people a lot in my life, so I have no problems with them. So please understand that when they say European royals and elites and whatever else, um, throughout the document, whatever else, this is these particular Judge Dale's particular point of view or perspective. Um, and we're not pointing, I here at Badwolf Unincorporated, we are not pointing out anybody like that. I actually disagree with some of what they were saying. We still do have a constitutional country. America is still constitutional, but it is dormant because we don't know. We don't really use it. Okay. Um, so they're just kind of basically in this first section here kind of telling you how, there's a lot of anti-Christian, racist, Marxist type groups. Yes, these are things are true. There are a lot of these things in here. If you guys want to read through the first part and, for yourself, feel free. I'm not going to necessarily go through all this. We already know like the FDA is kind of corrupt and certain presidents, um, have problems and issues. To me, it's kind of a lot of rhetoric in here. Just, um, but let's see here. Um, all right, so let's start somewhere in here after we get through some of the other stuff. It's a lot of boring reading. Once again, you can get these documents online, but let's start here. Like I said, I want us to focus on the work itself, not, we'll just say conjecture or whatever else. But if you want to read it, you're more than welcome to get the document yourself. And let's see here and read through it. I'm familiar with it. I want to save some time. I think it's kind of just boring to hear. But for those people not in the game or not really sure, it's good to know.
The American Bar Association is a foreign union and its members are all working in collusion with Israel, the British Empire, the Vatican, the Rothschild and Rockefeller banking empires, Congress and the elite to undermine America.
Now, of course, there may be some truth. Obviously, no one has brought forth this, but I will say that everything mentioned here, I've been able to uncover that there is definitely some truth, but understand some of it is just business, as usual, normal stuff. Some of it is corrupt and underhanded. We'll never know which ones are doing like the worst this or the that, but yes, these are the major players on the top level from what I've been able to see. But once again, we do not know to what degree any of them. So we're not pointing out that all of the Vatican is bad or whatever. But we do know that all of these have different divisions, including the United States, that do things and almost none, well, most of these things they're doing for their own nation or company or entity's best interest. And unfortunately, we the American people are being fleeced in some degree by every one of these. We're being used and played. And most of y'all don't even know these things, so that's why they're able to get away with it. But once again, do your own research, but let's keep going.
All attorneys are agents of a foreign power who swear allegiance to that foreign power, i.e., the Queen of England. This is why all lawyers must file a written notice of appearance in every court case they represent. By that notice, the lawyer is admitting to the court that he is a foreign agent and he is requesting permission to represent you in that corporate court. Your contract with the lawyer gives him your sovereign power of attorney to represent your best interests, and he immediately uses it against you by admitting to the judge that you will accept the jurisdiction and decisions of the corporate court.
Facts.
So much for winning your case or any appeal. When a prosecutor loses a trial, he is obligated by the court to pay the costs of prosecution out of pocket. Your attorney always divulges your defense strategy to the prosecutor to avert this embarrassment and penalty from being assigned to him. This group is a brotherhood, and these corporate courts are a business, and everything is about commerce. People are regarded as nothing more than corporate property. The American Bar Association is actually a branch of the National Lawyers Guild Communist Party, which can only be located in the hard copy printing of 28 U.S.C. 3002, Section 15A. The online version of Title 28 U.S.C. has been altered by the Attorney General to read something entirely different, apparently because this fact has recently shown up in too many private court petitions and memorandums of law. To become a member of the American Bar Association, applicants must have obtained a doctorate in law or the equivalent thereof and passed an examination designed to test the depth of their indoctrination. If they pass, they are required to surrender their American citizenship and swear allegiance to the Queen of England and not the Constitution. This means that all card-carrying American lawyers are foreign agents, liars, traitors, and communists. No wonder Jesus warned us about lawyers. The privately owned corporate Federal Reserve System's debt has cleverly been renamed the national debt, to suggest that this is the American public debt. However, it is not America's debt but rather Israel's debt and the private federal. Page 7 of 94. The Great American Adventure. Reserves corporate debt, and yet we have been deceived into thinking and believing the complete opposite by the corporate slave drivers through their use of patriotic slogans like, "This is the cost of freedom." If you want more proof, examine the fine print of your savings or checking account contract. You will discover that each time you opened one of these accounts you agree to be responsible for the repayment of the national debt. Now, why would that language ever be included in an application for a checking or savings account if the national debt already was our responsibility? The answer is, so that the banks may confiscate your assets without further permission. Pretty clever on their part, if I do say so. Would it interest you to know that the FCC, CIA, FBI, IMF, NSA, IRS, OPM, ATF, DEA, NASA, Interpol, HS, Homeland Security, and all the other members of the Alphabet Gang are all privately owned corporations, and none of them are or ever has been an agency of United States Incorporated. The United States government always held some stock in these corporations but never outright owned or controlled any of them. Their employees receive their paychecks from OPM, which belongs to the IMF, which is the property of the United Nations, which belongs to Israel and the royal and elite class of Europe. All of the alphabet gangs are now the registered property of the United Nations.
So from my perspective, and I could be wrong, so don't quote me, I look at it as America, the real land, is our nation, and that the U.S. corporation, which is a corporation which is controlled by the Queen of England, the City of London, and the Vatican, up from there, because it's a corporation, and as that corporation is essentially owned by those three, and then those three up from there are owned probably by these other nations and entities. All right. So a little bit different on the wording, but basically the premise is pretty much the same.
Nations. Is it no wonder that President Wilson's League of Nations never got off the ground, and that out of 267 nations on the earth, only 71 are members of the United Nations? All of this deception is compounded by the refusal of ordinary Americans to realize, know, or understand that it is this secrecy and duplicity of privately owned corporations, being surreptitiously portrayed as American agencies in government, coupled with the deceit and endless greed of Israel, European bankers, and the royal and elite families of the world, that have come together to fleece the American people like the sheep they truly are, and unfortunately, America's public apathy and ignorance only serves to reinforce the lie. This paper hopes to expose many of these secrets of America, but unfortunately not all of them. A few references have been suggested or offered for you to investigate on your own, if you are so inclined. If you strongly disagree with anything I have written, great, now prove that I am wrong, but be careful how you react, because we patriotic Americans have all been taught from an early age to just simply deny without proof anything that contradicts that imaginary template defined as the American way of life. I happen to know that everything that will be discussed herein is factual, and I grant you that these secrets of America will not be easy to digest, because deception never is an easy pill for anyone to swallow. If ignorance truly is bliss, you certainly can choose to remain apathetic and ignorant, or you can decide to. Page 8 of 94. The Great American Adventure. Grow up and begin to digest some hardcore reality. Some of your best friends may be lawyers, judges, and politicians, and unfortunately they are all a part of the lie, and they all have sworn an oath to propagate the lie and deny the truth, so you may need to do some soul-searching and investigation of your own. It was hard for me to accept too. Those who do not know their past are condemned to repeat it. George Santayana. Offered as a prologue, the most objective and original information I have discovered concerning the origin of an ancient system of crowd and mind control called Babylonian slave driving techniques and its historic application and effects upon the European and American culture was researched by a group of Asian historians. All of what they discovered is extremely germane in understanding the secrets of America, and this information helps to set the stage for the Great American Adventure. The following is a brief synopsis of their research, which I have condensed, utilizing my knowledge, experience, and comprehension of their systematic investigation, and I have included several small details in that synopsis, which I uncovered during my many years of research. I warn you that most Asian people believe in a deep spirituality more so than in religious dogma, miracles, or human gods, and that such Christian beliefs will be treated by them with complete indifference. I apologize now if I tend to repeat myself at times or go off on tangents throughout the body of this paper, but unfortunately I find it most difficult not to, when each timeline event or topic lends itself to further qualitative or quantifiable data. Page 9 of 94. The Great American Adventure. Prologue. At the dawn of human history. At the dawn of human history, some 6,000 years ago, in the ancient city of Babylon, a spurt of great prosperity in agriculture brought about a population boom and the formation of family tribes, which also spirited a frenzy of fights and battles within and between these groups in an effort to establish tribal supremacy. Out of this confusion arose an intelligent and tyrannical individual by the name of Hammurabi. Hammurabi devised a system of mind control, population control, and laws of conduct and trade, which was later defined as the Babylonian slave driving techniques. Hammurabi's system of controls was reduced into writing, in which he combined local folk wisdom and prophecy, in an effort to lend to his system more credibility among the tribes, and he included additional propaganda about the existence of an omniscient, omnipresent, almighty God, who saw all things, rewarded all deeds, and punished all misconduct. Note: there was another civilization the size of the ancient Roman Empire that existed near the city of Babylon some 2,000 years earlier, which has just recently been discovered by archaeologists, and it would be a reasonable conclusion or assumption that the folk wisdom and prophecy of Babylon was actually derived from this earlier civilization. The continent of Atlantis, however, existed several thousands of years before that, which continues to be denied by the royal and elite faction through their slave drivers, paid historians, paid scientists, and media representatives. Hammurabi's system of control, conduct, folklore, and prophecy preempted the Christian Holy Bible and the general laws of government. His trade laws would eventually become known as the Law of Merchants, which is still used and recognized today internationally as the Uniform Commercial Code. Hammurabi plagiarized the concept and existence of an almighty God, which had been prophesied for many years in folk legend, and he cleverly included himself in these writings as the man named Abraham. Note: as you read on, you will see that according to these Asian historians, They have concluded that the Christian Holy Bible was actually compiled by the royal and elite classes to be used as a tool to keep them in power and to help them control and drive the ignorant and unwashed masses defined as their slaves. Individuals in Mesopotamian eventually built upon Hammurabi's concept of crowd, mind control, his all-seeing and all-knowing God, and the prophecy of Abraham. One of their members, a bearded man with a charismatic persona, appeared out of clean air, sat upon a throne and proclaimed to all of the tribes that his royal status and bloodline was derived from none other than Abraham. Page 10 of 94. The Great American Adventure. There was no way to prove the truth of his statements, and so in order to maintain this belief of his royal status and retain absolute control over the many tribes, a series of great visual aids and displays resembling miracles were engineered. Next, this God King employed and empowered a special sect of slave drivers to further cement his will and control over the people, which initiated the birth of the Freemasons. 1/10 of the wealth of the tribe's agriculture would be demanded of and surrendered to this God King as a tax upon his subjects, which he called tithing. Eventually, the combined tribes invaded the pagan empire of Egypt, and the Freemasons added the Egyptian slave driving techniques to their arsenal of knowledge. The symbol adopted by the Freemasons to identify their special sect was plagiarized from the pagan religion of Egypt, which was the all-seeing eye encased in the apex of a pyramid, and which was intended to convey to the masses that their duties and authority was superior to them and was derived from the all-seeing and all-knowing Almighty God.
So my experience and knowledge varies a little bit different in what was just said here. So I cannot co-sign on, actually, I'm not co-signing on any of these aspects. But there is truth there. And generally, the way I look at it is if you weren't there, you can't 100% speak on something 100%. You know what I mean? But do your own research. I'm not pointing out any groups or any particular anything here. Once again, this is all education. Um, let's see, but basically, it just kind of goes on about, the Bible aspect. Like I said, if you guys want to read through that stuff, that's fine. Um, let's see. It's just a lot of reading about the short story is yes, European families, Rothschilds, blah 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 blah, are all to some degree they all know each other. They're all players in this. I just don't want to have you guys sit here for an hour. The Vatican, the cardinals, the bishop. I have heard of the legend of the Black Pope who really runs the Vatican, um, Chinese royal families. Yeah, so like basically, the long story short is that a lot of these old families that you guys never heard of, I don't even know their names, but they're still in control through the various entities, and they're the ones who do the you know push for the wars and so that's basically what a lot of this is. I don't want to waste your time with a lot of stuff that's not going to help you on a daily basis. If you really want to read what they say, you can believe in this if you want or not. Like I said, I generally read and listen to a little bit of everything and then try to see the truth because to this date, I haven't read one book that has 100% of the truth. And like I said, I have found some things I would consider to be mistakes within um, the doctrine here, but that's also because I have access to a lot more resources in some areas than I think Judge Dale has, but there's some that I don't. So I can't say that it's you know, all I can say is read it, but take it with a grain of salt. Just be apprised of the information. And it talks about the persecution of the Pilgrims and the Iroquois Indian nations having like the first government. But there are also other ones that claim the same thing as a Native American I've researched. So we're getting uh, one particular person's perspective on a lot of history. All right. So that's why I said I like to get down to the knowledge. Colonization of America. Um, so yeah, this is where it starts to get better. So let's start here or restart. Um, like I said, it's probably like it's almost 100 pages altogether. We're on page 23. I don't want you guys to sit here and get bored like, oh my God, but if you really want to read through it, just find this document online. You can read the whole thing. For the YouTube channel, like I said, I want you guys to focus on the important aspects of it, and you
The
guys can
colonization of America
go
continued
from
to
there.
expand while King George grew deeper in debt to the Rothschild Bank. It was Mayer Amschel Bauer, a Sabbatean Jew and the founder of the Rothschild banking empire, who suggested to King George that he tax the American colonies and demand his payment in gold. Since he was thoroughly in debt to the Rothschild Bank, King George subsequently decided to follow Mr. Bauer's advice to tax all commerce entering or exiting the Americas, and he demanded his payment in gold. His first tax was on tea. The colonists did not trade in gold but had developed a system of exchange based upon promissory notes called colonial script, which is similar to the Federal Reserve notes of today. The difference between colonial script and Federal Reserve notes is consent. The colonists consented to establish and honor the colonial script as a fair medium of exchange and which bore no interest charges, whereas Federal Reserve notes were thrust upon Americans by the Rothschild royal family, without our consent, with interest and the intent of stealing the fruits of American labor, equity, and assets.
Now, remember, for those people who don't know, I do have some videos on some of this information on jamesclovett.com, and there is still remedy with those Federal Reserve notes, but you have to know how to and when utilize it. Okay, so let's keep going.
The king's demand for gold is what instigated the Boston Tea Party and not the historic claim of taxation without representation. The colonists were actually willing to pay King George's tea tax, providing he would accept his payment in colonial script, which he could then trade back to them for tobacco and hemp products, and he refused. In response to the Boston Tea Party, King George sent his military in force to intimidate the colonists. This resulted in an armed confrontation and many skirmishes, which was later billed and classified as the Revolutionary War. The 51 colonists who are counted as being the founding fathers prepared and served a declaration upon King George, declaring America's independence from England under the name of the United States of America, which did not set well with the king. In fact, it outraged him. The colonists learned to fight guerrilla-style warfare from fighting with and against the various Indian tribes and subsequently won many of these revolutionary skirmishes, but they never had a prayer of winning a war, and besides, King George never intended to kill off the colonists because, who then would pay his tax? All he was attempting to do was regain control over his deposed slaves and any new slaves who had joined forces with the colonists. Another historic fact that has been concealed from our history is that the first and foremost crop to be grown in America was hemp or marijuana. America got its commercial start from a plant that is now classified as Schedule I drug. Each of the founding fathers owned large hemp plantations. The colonists made rope, flags, homespun clothing, sails, writing paper, and medicine from the processed hemp, and the sterilized seed was used in baking, called page 23 of 94. The Great American Adventure. Sesame seeds. The Declaration of Independence and the Constitution is actually written on hemp paper.
Okay. But I do want to send a shout out to the Anti-Corruption Society. They're the ones hosting this particular file. But once again, this file is available and in the free domain on the internet. It is not their property, but they are hosting it. So I just want to shout out to them for doing the same thing that I'm trying to do, which is to educate you guys and get you guys into the game. All right.
written on hemp paper. The introduction of tobacco eventually changed the score because tobacco was so naturally addictive that England couldn't get enough of it and purchased all the colonists could grow. Tobacco sold for more money than hemp, however, hemp had more practical uses. Many colonial farmers split their land into two, half hemp and half tobacco, whereas others changed over to all tobacco. All of the colonists grew corn, potatoes, squash, apples, cabbage, and raised chickens, beef and dairy cattle, and sheep, but that was for their own personal consumption and not for export. England had just defeated Napoleon, and the English soldiers were battle-weary, and most of the English soldiers refused to fight the American colonists because so many of the colonists were their relatives. So Mr. Bauer traveled to Prussia and engaged the services of unemployed Hessian mercenaries for the career English officers to command. The Hessian soldiers had just finished fighting the 7 Years' War, and there was little need or employment for career soldiers. Their contract pay with Bauer was for 50 cents a day, and Mr. Bauer billed the king for $1 a day. Since King George had a revolving charge with the Rothschild Bank, repayment for these soldiers would eventually be required of him in gold. Moral: never trust a banker or a Sabbatean Jew. Upon defeating the French, a second suggestion was presented to King George by Mr. Bauer, which was for the king to arrange through his newly appointed civilian administrator of France, to offer the Continental Congress a loan and appropriations to supply and finance the Revolutionary War. George's plan and logic was simple: to bring America to its knees in debt and then foreclose on it. Unfortunately, colonial America didn't have a prayer of winning, and most of the money and appropriations loaned or sold to them went into the pockets of the members of the Founding Fathers. King George now controlled England, Ireland, and France and ruled over roughly 60 million subjects. He also possessed the largest and most efficient military force known at that time, which was the combined army and navy of France and England. The American colony, known as the Virginia Colony, was populated by 3 million men, women, and children in total, and most of the men were farmers and tradesmen or bond slaves, armed only with knives and flintlock muskets. So it is beyond imagination that anyone could possibly believe that the American colonists ever won or possessed a chance of winning the Revolutionary War or the War of 1812. But then, if you tell a lie big enough and keep repeating it, people will begin to believe you. Page 24 of 94. The Great American Adventure. Nobody won the Revolutionary War, but since the English military was first to stop fighting, the Continental Congress declared that America won the war, based upon an old maxim of law, which reads, "He who leaves the field of battle first loses." 20 members of the Continental Congress were formerly founding fathers and were once English lawyers and aristocrats who had received considerable training in the art of English law, and they thought up that little jewel. Need I say more?
So if you're like me, this is all stuff I've never heard before. I mean, I read this long time ago, years ago. I mean, a long, long time ago. And I'd have to say, I do believe that there is some truth to what's being stated here. I mean, we don't know where the exact lines are, but it checks out to me a lot of this and makes sense. Um, I mean, at the time, the British were, you know, I mean, they were a world power. I mean, yeah, sure, we had the colonies, but we didn't have the resources that they had. So to me, I don't see how we even survived that. But really coming now to find out that it was a corporate business deal. And that is where then the District of Columbia came in. Because if you look up the District of Columbia, we don't own that. It was our land. We ceded it to them. You try to look up who owns it officially or any of the documents on it, and that's all considered national security. You won't get your hands on it. Why? That's kind of sketchy to me. I mean, we know who owns it. You know, we have history books that still yet or there's a good book you can get called The District of Columbia, the Empire City, and it tells you, it shows you. So as you start to learn these things, it's like, man, history is different than what we really thought it was. We got the slave version of what went on, and there was a whole nother world in front of these people's eyes that they knew about, but we didn't know. So, but once again, do your own research, and these are not directly my feelings or thoughts. I'm just kind of give you some of my thoughts on what's being said, but in general, I just kind of want you guys to hear this so that you guys can start to question things. I'm not construing this as true or not, but I find it interesting. All right. And there's lots of good information coming down later, so just bear with me.
More. This situation, however, posed a new problem for the Continental Congress to resolve, which was how to place their debt to France on the backs of the American colonists. They decided to tax all alcoholic beverages, which was the impetus that started the American moonshine business and rum smuggling trade. One of the largest rum smugglers in America was founding father, John Hancock. Mr. Bauer also had an ulterior motive apart from collecting the king's debt to his bank in gold. Bauer viewed the American colonies as an untapped resource and a prime location to establish another branch of his Rothschild bank. His plan was simple: to establish a branch of his banking empire in the colonies, replace the colonial script with his corporate bank script, and then extend unlimited credit to the colonists with a repayment in gold. It worked on King George, so why shouldn't it work in the American colonies? Bauer also changed his last name to Rothschild around this time frame. Note: the colonists never knew that the state of Virginia was as rich in gold deposits as the state of California and the Dakotas, and that this little piece of information was kept secret from the public for a very good reason. The high contracting powers wanted to expand the Virginia colonies to the west coast of America and defeat the Red Race at the same time, and so the California Gold Rush rumor was created by the American government. It was a rumor that was spread around the world in order to entice immigration and to replace the immigrants who died during their westward migration. Rothschild, however, was unsuccessful in accomplishing his plan for the American colony because the Continental Congress rejected his proposal based in part on a business plan they were drafting or modifying that was designed to ensure and protect their individual interests, titled The Constitution of the United States of America, which was a modified version of the Iroquois Federation Government Constitution. The Articles of Confederation was the outline for the Constitution, and which spelled out their business plan to control America. The colonists were never asked if they wanted a constitution, nor were they asked to vote on this document, because the Continental Congress had always. Page 25 of 94. The Great American Adventure. Intended to steal North America for their own personal posterity. The term "we the people" was actually defined to mean "we the delegates" by the Articles of Confederation, but we Americans were never told that little piece of information. The safeguards found in the Constitution was not for our protection, but was actually intended to prevent any one or group of founding fathers from cutting the others out, which is conclusive proof in support of the old proverb, which reads, "There is no honor among thieves." While Mr. Rothschild openly condemned the use of colonial script as money by calling it worthless, his agents and employees who had secretly infiltrated the American colonies were instructed to buy up or trade for all available script that they could lay their hands on. While this was going on, Rothschild sent his top banking agent in Europe to further infiltrate the new American government, a man by the name of Alexander Levine. Once in America, Mr. Levine changed his last name to Hamilton to obscure his Sabbatean Jewish ancestry and conceal any connection as the CFO of the Rothschild banking empire. Alexander Hamilton secured employment as the personal secretary to General George Washington, and after Washington's election to the office of president, Alexander Hamilton was appointed by President Washington as the first United States Secretary of the Treasury. Alexander Hamilton, however, always remained loyal to the Rothschild family and the Rothschild Bank, and as the first United States Secretary of the Treasury, he manipulated the value of the colonial script that the Rothschild agents had accumulated and drafted a proposed and charter for the first United States Central Bank with a 20-year contract. President George Washington signed the central bank charter into law and therein successfully entered the Rothschild banking empire into American commerce by the stroke of a pen. Note: our public education in American history taught us to laud Alexander Hamilton as a great American hero and patriot, when all along he was just another one of the many traitors to America who helped to undermine the Republic and the new American government.
And really, so was George Washington. All right. So a lot of them all made interesting deals for one reason or another. Not all of them, but a lot of the ones we thought were these great heroes. I've lived long enough to see a number of people who I thought were heroes all over the United States. I mean, even as of this week, and come to find out that a lot of them are just not who you thought they were. You could say they're still people and people are fallible. That is true. And then you've got the ones who sold out our country on different levels, different pieces at a time. And then you find out that there are people more powerful than the president. And you start to question everything.
Personal secretary to General George Washington, and after Washington's election to Alexander Hamilton. Note: when the Founding Fathers rejected the Rothschilds' request for another 20-year charter, in a fit of rage and with King George's help, Nathan Rothschild, who was in charge of the London branch, provoked and personally financed the entire cost of the War of 1812. During the War of 1812, King George deduced that if he destroyed the American symbol of government and eliminated specific signers of the Declaration of Independence, whom he deemed to be the troublemakers, called patriots and loyalists, and burned the actual Declaration of Independence, that those acts. Page 26 of 94. The Great American Adventure. Of force and violence should take the fight out of the American colonists, and they would succumb to he and Nathan Rothschild's plans. 30 of the 51 signers of the Declaration of Independence were loyal Americans, and the other 21 were traitors and were secretly loyal to King George. We laud these 21 traitors as heroes and patriots of the American Revolution because our government has taught us to do so, but never a word has been written, spoken, or taught about the other 30 loyalists who gave their last full measure of devotion in our cause of liberty. Don't you find that just a little suspicious? After the White House in Philadelphia was burned and specific American loyalists, their entire families and relatives were murdered and burned in their homes in order to eliminate them as martyrs, the fighting stopped. The colonists returned to their trades and the English military took up quarters in New Amsterdam, now New York, for the next 8 years before returning to England, and the Continental Congress once again declared America the victors. Prior to the war,
Once again, education and entertainment info purposes only. This is considered history, but once again, this is a perspective of history and events. Do your own research.
Prior to the War of 1812, Benjamin Franklin made numerous trips to England, supposedly to visit an English woman and love interest. However, colonial documents suggest that Franklin was a common participant in the sex parties held by the wealthy, so why travel to England to visit a love interest?
Well, this is true from what I've researched, but also Benjamin Franklin was a freak. Okay, so he went there probably for business, but he also got his shaboink on in these places that they underground called hellfire clubs. Okay, a lot of wild stuff. You think Diddy was doing some stuff? Yeah, Mr. Benjamin Franklin here, you thought was just flying kites and stuff, was high, drunk, smashing anything that moved. So yeah, it's a little there's a different history y'all don't know, and they give you guys the sanitary. Well, we'll just say the gutted because it definitely ain't sanitary.
Interest? Can anyone explain why Franklin died a bachelor and how the British military possessed the names and addresses of all 30 Loyalist family members and their relatives with specific directions to the homes of all 30 patriots on the King's death list?
That's wild.
Ironically, the other 21 founding fathers and their families were never harmed or threatened. The
Yeah.
Treaty of Paris, aka the Treaty of Peace, was negotiated by Franklin, Adams, and Jay. In the Treaty of Paris was the concession that King George's son, Prince William, is the sovereign ruler of America. I might also point out that around this time, Benjamin Franklin became the first Postmaster General, John Jay became the first Supreme Court Chief Justice, and Samuel Adams served as Vice President under George Washington for 2 terms before being elected as the second President of the United States. Were those positions appointed or arranged for based upon merit, or were they actually rewards from a grateful king? Remember the constitutional amendment regarding the separation of church and state? Well, it may very well have been added and adopted by the Founding Fathers because of the great historic influence continually wielded by the Pope and the Church of Rome. The Founding Fathers were planning to steal America for themselves, so it would only make sense that such a prohibition and amendment be incorporated into their business plan, Constitution, to avoid an. Page 27 of 94. The Great American Adventure. Open confrontation with the Pope and the Church of Rome. If the Holy Roman Church eventually infiltrated America, the Pope would then be prohibited from involving the Church in the business of the new government. George Washington, the first American president and the epitomized father of this country, had his own plan in mind: to be anointed King of America, and after his election, George overthrew the organic Constitution for the United States of America under the Articles of Confederation and reinstated the Virginia Colony Corporation, and thereafter eliminated the first constitutional civilian government on April 30, 1789. George had a law background and relied upon the Articles of Confederation to perform his treasonous plot, and then he immediately took office 1 year before the organic Constitution would have lawfully permitted him to do so. George died at the age of 67 in 1799 Virginia, and his only rightful claims to fame is treason and that he initiated a legacy of military dictatorships called the American Presidency.
Wow.
Few Americans understand the kind of man George Washington really was, and it is highly doubtful that George ever told the truth. George is a hero in the eyes of the corporate state and federal government politicians, but he was actually an opportunist, a liar, a tyrant, and a traitor to America. George's first official presidential act was to install a corporate military government to replace the expected constitutional civilian government, which just happens to be the same one that exists to date. President Washington's military government is intentionally hidden in plain sight, which is evidenced by the military terms utilized to describe those designated offices, e.g., Commander-in-Chief, Attorney General, Auditor General, Secretary General, Postmaster General, Surgeon General, etc. Every office is supervised by a military general.
Huh.
Sometimes the
I mean, if y'all like me, this is wild talk right here. You know, Judge Dale is talking reckless compared to what we know about in school, what we were taught. But I mean, you can't help but see the word general right here. And all of these are military type words. I never really looked at it like that. Man, let's keep going. As always, guys, do your own research. But I'm just saying, I found this interesting.
best hiding place is one in plain sight. Edgar Allan Poe. President Washington's actions were treasonous to be certain, and he was fully supported by the first elected members of the Continental Congress, which amounts to subordination of treason and conspiracy. The organic constitution would have bound the hands of the president and Congress, and so they all decided that it had to be eliminated or circumvented.
Yeah, so obviously they didn't get really rid of it. They they abridged it, which is what we're experiencing today. Interesting. Let's go.
Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Lord Acton, 1887. George also established the first Masonic lodge in America with the intent of mustering the support of the influential colonial families to declare him America's king, and to his chagrin his plan failed miserably because he could not secure the influence or support required. These influential people were page 28 of 94. The Great American Adventure. Already faithful to the King George and the new Rothschild royal family, and Washington is very lucky that he wasn't assassinated. On an historic note, George Washington is indirectly descended from William, the Prince of Orange, an Illuminati high priest and thus a relation to the Rothschild royal family. Ironically, every president of the United States has been directly or indirectly related to this same royal bloodline ever since. Even our current president is connected through his mother's side of the family. Note: throughout my early years as an American, I was taught in public school and convinced that anyone can become president and that the American public made that choice. Evidence now reveals that our choices were pre-selected for us, and that every high-ranking candidate, either Democrat or Republican, had to be a part of the elite class and had to agree to adhere to the whims and demands of the high contracting powers who control and run approximately 71 of the 267 countries of the world via the United Nations, and now are commonly referred to as the criminal cabal. Their board of directors operate on American soil under the protection of a European corporation titled Lumacorp. All of these people are all of.
Now, once again, if somebody wants to go out there and fact check and see if there is a Lumicorp or any of the rest of this, please do so. If you find information to the contrary, I will make a video pointing out any mistakes in here. I have no problem with doing that. Once again, we are not standing on 100% of all this is factual, okay? But we know that there's a lot of truth that I know, some things that, like, with the access I have, I know some of these things are true. I just can't tell you that all of them are true because I don't know. One, I wasn't there. Two, I haven't sat down to research every single thing mentioned here. But man, there's a lot of stuff that connects. There's a lot of stuff that connects. And as they continue to go on, you're going to see a number of things in this document here that you're going to be like, yeah, that makes sense. Or something like that is going on right now. That's all I'm saying. But let's keep going.
Of the same royal bloodline and form the nucleus of the secret society and criminal cabal known as the Illuminati.
Now, understand, I've already brought one former member of the Illuminati onto my YouTube channel. Um, so we know that they are real, okay? But I'll say this, there are also, if you want to call them the Illuminati, there are also good Illuminati, okay? Believe it or not. So they're not, the Illuminati just means the enlightened one, okay? Meaning you know knowledge and you're supposed to be one who seeks light. So there is, I mean, the Illuminati started off as being a good thing, got infiltrated, much like a lot of these other things. So there's good and bad Illuminati, good and bad Masons, good and bad Christians, good and bad Muslims. So like everything else, where there is a person or entity, it's bound to be corrupted. All right, so keep that in mind. Don't be like, oh, the red is better than the blue is better than the red, blah blah. Same two heads of the same snake. Okay, two different heads, same body. But in this case, there are good ones. But what good are the good ones if we don't know or see, or they're not doing a lot to help? But it seems like the bad ones, try to spread the bad everywhere, and the good ones just kind of hold the fort. That's what I've seen. The good ones just like they kind of like just maintain their little bubble of good, and the bad ones like, no, let's spread this everywhere like a virus. And this, and it wasn't even me, but in here, Judge Dale, which was surprising, mentioned Atlantis because that was where a lot of these problems started. Once again, and they started off as good and then got corrupt and then played with the harmonics of the planet with their technology and caused the earth to shift and the flood and all these other problems. So there's a lot of, no matter where you go, there's just even right now, we're crossbreeding this and that and playing around with germs and bacteria and viruses. Like, it's just like, I would like to say that we, the people, just don't seem to understand to leave certain things alone, but it's not all of us. It's just the bad ones in power and the good ones in power. Well, I don't know. I've never really met good ones in power. So I hope that they are fighting them and doing good instead of just sitting back and holding the line. But I don't know. That's above my pay grade. But let's keep going.
Illuminati. We Americans have been indoctrinated through expert programming, conditioning, prejudice, and patriotism to treat information like this as being ridiculous, absurd, and untrue. Time to grow up, America. Look around you and look at your lives. They have eliminated the family farms and local stores, placed us into cities, gave our industry a way to break the unions, issued valueless currency and stole our gold and silver, raised taxes and stole their paper currency back, involved us in staged wars, began a mass foreclosure of American homes and poisoned our air and public water. How long can you continue to believe in their complex fairy tales? George Washington and the Continental Congress all feared that their treasonous conduct would become public knowledge and their reprisals swift and certain, so they concealed these facts by hiring authors to write and publish a different account of historical facts. Note, these facts and all post-events will continue to be altered by the high contracting powers, which will eventually be force-fed to all Americans through control vehicles like the media, Hollywood, and public or parochial schools.
Man, once again, on point. My question in rebutting this document, if I had to go there, is okay, if you're saying, this is all true, like, where did Judge Dale learn all this? Because this isn't in regular books. This is a lot of detailed information. Is there a book of books, a book of secrets, or while being a judge for X amount of time that you learned all of this? I mean, this is a lot of information. And this particular person, I mean, you got to have a good mind to remember all of this and write it all down. I mean, this is pretty detailed. So I can't to like I said, I know a lot of this stuff too, so I can't say that like, oh no, nobody else would know all this stuff. I know a lot of this. I know which parts I've personally researched to know are true in here. But then there's some things, once again, that are above my pay grade, so I'm still learning. But wanted to expose you guys to this particular variation of history or variant perspective of history. But once again, I don't know. I don't know if there's a book where this is all detail or if this is word of mouth. Judge Dale doesn't go into that. And once again, it's not like Judge Dale has their picture and phone number and all that on there. So once again, this everything in here, well, not I'll tell you this. I definitely know everything in here is not fake. I just don't know about some of these connecting claims, allegations are solid. But yeah, there's a lot of truth in here.
George Washington and the Continental Congress all feared that their treasonous Note: Abraham Lincoln. Being the absolute liberal that he was, President Abraham Lincoln attempted to do everything within his power to avoid a civil war. The published version of American history doesn't reflect the fact that Lincoln had offered to compromise his stand on slavery, e.g., his proposal was that 1/7 of the slave population would be freed each year during the following 7 years. Page 29 of 94. The Great American Adventure. There were forces unknown to him who were instigating a civil war and who were ready to blame Lincoln and the slave question. These forces also convinced the Southern states to secede from the Union, which was certain to destroy the foundation of the American government, and so a civil war was imminent. The secession of the Southern states from the Union technically destroyed the United States Congress because a quorum could never be convened, so all acts by the Congress during the Civil War was never lawful. Note: this last statement is based upon the presumption that anything Congress did before that timeline was somehow lawful. Lincoln attempted to cure this problem of the absence of a quorum by declaring that America was at war. He supported his actions based upon the War Powers Clause found within the unenforceable, organic Constitution of the United States of America. To his credit, Lincoln was the first president who intended to sever the European royal and Rothschild factions' control over the United States, which, like President John Kennedy, resulted in both of their deaths. The high contracting powers, European royal and elite, preferred a war to a peace because war stimulated commerce, and they all stood in a position to profit from every service generated by and within commerce, especially during a war. While the war carried on, it would act as a diversion to their subterfuge and their Babylonian slave control techniques. At the start of the Civil War, Lincoln attempted to secure financing for the North from the Central Bank of America, named the United States Bank, which belonged to the Rothschild banking empire. The central bank demanded a high interest, a lien on the government treasury.
Once again, if you notice here, these people that allegedly control, you know, a lot of these corporations, which are, banks, etc., a lot of time, I mean, they don't care that they put a corporation in place and call it the United States Bank. Like they don't care that, I mean, if anything, that just kind of helps us to not question anything. It's like, what you think they're going to say, like European Royal Bank? They're going to call it that and then place it here. It would fail instantly. No, none of us would use it. Well, I don't know. There are some traitors to the United States, so there would be some, but not enough for it to do its thing.
Treasury, and repayment of the loan in gold. Lincoln was so outraged by these terms and the lack of sentiment and patriotism that he promised when the war was over, his first act will be to drive the central bank out of America, and the verbiage used in Lincoln's Gettysburg Address would redefine his desire and intent to break the corrupt ties of the European royal and elite that controlled and bound America. It was his stated threat about the central bank and his Gettysburg Address that caused Lincoln's assassination and not his stand on slavery. Threats leveled against America's banks will continue to be the impetus for many future murders. During the American Civil War, the Confiscation Act of 1861 was adopted. This was an act between the military governments representing the North and the South and was defined by those governmental bodies to be the rules of engagement and military protocol, concerning how those governments and their military will deal with American citizens during time of war. The words. Page 30 of 94. The Great American Adventure. Time of war will become a key in years to come with the passage of the Lieber Code and the Trading with the Enemy Act. The Confiscation Act specified that anyone who fought against the government of the North would automatically lose his property, but non-combatants who had suffered such property loss or confiscation would subsequently be entitled to lawful compensation. A legal ruse to be certain. Note, the Confiscation Act. How do you prove a negative, that you are a non-combatant or not guilty of a crime, and why should anyone have to, especially when it is physically impossible? This reminds me of the Catholic Inquisition and the Salem witch trials. Everyone accused of witchery was burned at the stake or drowned because no one could prove that they were not a witch. In 1863, the Lieber Code was adopted, as well as General Order No. 100, signed by President Abraham Lincoln. This code is similar in nature to the Confiscation Act and the Geneva Convention, to be discussed next, and better defined how Union soldiers shall conduct themselves in time of war, and specified that any military officer, who violated this code, shall be treated as a belligerent. This became another key word then and in the future, because a belligerent shall come to be treated as a combatant, and as such, subject to the Confiscation Act and the loss of his liberty and all he owns.
Now you guys see why I use the term non-belligerent, non-combatant. This is all a military operation of control, banking, jurisdiction, taxing, corporate. That's it.
Owns. This is exactly what happens to defendants in America's courts of justice, or rather America's military courts. In 1864, the Virginia colony, America's corporate military government, under the guise of the United States of America, entered into an international treaty titled the Geneva Convention. International treaties are recognized by all of the world's governments and therefore carry more force and effect in law than any constitution or individual contracts called statutes. The crux of this particular international treaty specifically prohibited any and all military intervention and/or the operation of any military courts of justice over the civilian population of any conquered nation. By entering into this treaty as the United States of America, the treaty became null and void due to fraud, because America was actually operating under the corporation titled the Virginia Colony. Factually, Americans are a conquered people, conquered by the European royal and elite and by their own federal and state governments, with the stroke of a pen and the expert use of legalese, deception, patriotism, propaganda, fear, and intimidation. Hence, the proof of the old phrase coined by Sir Edward Bulwer Lytton, in his 1839 play about a papal conspiracy. Beneath the rule of men entirely great, the pen is mightier than the sword. Lincoln's declaration of war under the War Powers Clause of Article 1, Clause 8 of the Constitution has yearly and secretly been renewed by Congress and all past presidents, but for a different reason. Their renewed declaration of war. Page 31 of 94. The Great American Adventure specifies that the private corporate U.S. government is at war with America and its people, and defines the American public as the enemy of the state. Now you know why the President and Congress continue to screw us over and constantly lie to the American public.
So this is why, also on another level, once again, the United States is foreign in relationship to the United States of America. We're in the same family, but that doesn't mean we don't fight inside. And just like Rome, all infighting and many other great kingdoms or nations, once infighting starts, it begins its demise and collapse. This is why a lot of you people out here are all, there's people out there who are like, oh, well, I'm red, I'm blue, this and that. That's their game over here. That's not America. That's this U.S. government corp over here. That's not ours. It's a part of our family, but it's not ours. They're supposed to work for us, but they're foreign to America legally. They want you divided. They want controversy. They want dudes all in their soft guy era, so they don't have to worry about you fighting if we have to get busy. They want the girls to act like dudes and to live in ho culture because hoes ain't finna really pick up no guns. Soft dudes ain't finna do nothing. You guys see this, right? You see it now? They're playing chess and they're maneuvering all of the strong patriot Americans out of the way. They're making sure there's single family homes. Females are like, I don't need a man to protect my home. You got houses full of children and females, no man there. Now, I'm not saying all women need men. That's not what I'm saying. But once again, if you thought that, that's part of the problem. That wasn't even a thing 20 years ago. It didn't matter. People just lived, but generally men wanted women, women wanted men. Now men don't want to be bothered, and females only want the top 5% of males. And then they want to still be hoes. Not every male or every female, but you can see it in the what did they say above? They'll try to come at us through the school, public school, through Hollywood. Some of y'all might not realize why I'm showing you this is because all the other stuff I teach you with the law and dealing with court and whatever else, this is where it stems from. This game that's being played above our heads. Let's keep going. Believe what you want. I'm just trying to get you guys in the game. I'm trying to give you reasoning behind why things are the way they are. This is why they're playing a game, and if and we as Americans, we should not be in the game. We should know about the game and pull all of our money and assets and things out of the game and walk away and agree to disagree if we have a problem without hurting anybody. They want fighting. They want controversy. They want whole culture. They want soft dudes. They put stuff in our foods. Why do you think they allow all that? Because they're playing a game on all of us.
Public. Note, the mention of the Constitution by the corporate government is only done to appease the ear of the American people. The Congress, judges and bar lawyers laugh at Americans who claim protections under the Constitution and they label them constitutionalists. Still, the politicians and the media continue to pacify us by telling the American public that we are a free nation and a nation of laws, protected by a constitution.
So here's where I kind of disagree with Judge Dale. We are still, from my perspective, a free nation in the private. I notice Judge Dale doesn't really speak on the whole, talks about the public, but not so much the private. And maybe at the time of all this, Judge Dale didn't know about the private or really how that is the free nation. So, like I said, I disagree with some of the things in here. Some stuff I'll stand up and say. Other stuff, it's like, I'll let you guys do your own interpretations. But that one is important enough that I will say that I differ on that. But if you don't understand that, it's because all you're seeing is the corporation making an appearance to have gotten rid of the Constitution. It's still there. Matter of fact, if it wasn't there, we would be 100% under their rule and done. So that's why I said I don't buy into this 100%. But this gets you in the game. It gets you to understand that there's been a lot of things that have been put into place and that affect your life, and this is why. Because you didn't know there was a game being played. You knew it was bullshit, but you didn't know why or where or that it was this widespread.
It's people and defines the American public. We are a free. It sounds safe and comforting, and that is what the bulk of society really cares about, being safe and comfortable, because we equate our safety and pleasure with freedom. In December 2011, Congress repealed the Bill of Rights and in March 2012, repealed the First Amendment and ordered a media blackout of both events. So how safe do you feel now?
So they're saying in 2011, Congress repealed the Bill of Rights. So let's see. I mean, what Chat GPT has to say on that. Now, keep in mind, once again, it's searching the web. And so here it says there's no credible evidence in the United States that that actually happened. It says only one amendment has ever been repealed, the 18th on prohibition. Okay. So once again, could this be wrong? Sure, it very well could be. Chat GPT does make mistakes, but I haven't heard anything. I haven't seen, I mean, not one person other than this document is making this claim. I've never heard anybody else in all walks of life I've been through say that this happened. So once again, I do believe there are some mistakes in this, but overall, there is some truth. And so once again, do not believe everything you see, read, or hear.
On or about December 6, 1865, the Congress of the Virginia Colony, America's corporate military government, secretly rewrote the organic Constitution of the United States of America, twice in the same year, which disposed of the original 13th Amendment and then replaced the 13th by moving the 14th down to the 13th position. The original 13th Amendment prohibited lawyers from ever holding a seat in government, and now 98% of all government offices and 100% of all judges of the courts of record are held by lawyers.
So that part I can tell you is true. And maybe what I should have done is from the beginning of this document said which all sections I know to be truth. Maybe I'll do that in the next one or whatever else. Um, but I do like you guys to do your own research. This is true. This section is definitely true. And it should be the organic constitution for the United States of America. And the United part should be lowercase lettering if you really want to get into it. But this part is right. But yeah, there are parts in here that I disagree with wholeheartedly. But like I said, I don't want to slow down everything. I just want to kind of get to the key pieces here for you guys to kind of think about research. At the end of the day, this document, this video, whoop the F and do. It's about you knowing there's a game going on and that there's a difference between the public and the private, and that you need to be operating 90% or more in the private versus the public and tax exempt, all done the correct way. That's really what all this is about. But like I said, this will just help to give you guys some things to ponder, and we'll move on from there.
Lawyers. Makes you think, doesn't it? The 14th Amendment followed on the heels of the Emancipation Proclamation, which was supposed to free the slaves and define all of our individual rights, which turned out to be another canard. The 14th Amendment did just the opposite, which will be explained as you read on. In the next rewrite of the Constitution, the 15th, 16th and 17th Amendments were added without a constitutional convention or public vote and was actually rejected by every state government of the Republic. However, the Secretary of the Congress ignored the rejection letters and reported to Congress and the media that these amendments had been ratified by a sufficient number of states. These amendments were intended.
Now, if that's the case, that's treasonous. But once again, we can't prove this. You'd have to sit down, research, and then if they have a record of how many rejections they got, compare, and then if it was significant enough that it should have been rejected, then it should have been. All right. So they're saying there was no constitutional convention or public vote. So from their perspective, they were like, well, like I said, I don't know. At the time, was a constitutional convention needed for them to do that? Was a public vote in by law required at that particular time? I personally don't know. So that being the case, I would have to sit down with chat and then go through each one of these things and research. So once again, do not take all of this as fact. Just listen to the story. At the end of the day, it's about you guys moving the best way for you and yours and all that.
Intended to give the federal government the authority to tax us into poverty, and they use those amendments with great proficiency. Future arguments before the Supreme Court resulted in the High Court declaring that the legality of these amendments was a political issue and not a judicial one, and they subsequently refused to rule on them. Page 32 of 94.
So, if the Supreme Court ruled that these amendments were political in issue, that means that these amendments that were written in are political and not constitutional, which would then mean there is no need for a constitutional convention or a public vote, because the public are their own people. And if it's their stuff and it's a political issue, it's a political thing that they added to the Constitution, then they can ignore their own people, which are the public. It should have been a private vote of Americans. Do we even want that in our Constitution to be mentioned? You see what I'm saying? So it's a conundrum of different things going on here.
94. The Great American Adventure. Note: the Secretary of the Congress got away with this deception because the Constitution was never intended for America from the start. The colonists were functional illiterates and many a wool was pulled over their eyes, and unfortunately the same strategy continues to be used against us today, to keep all Americans functional but illiterate. Despite the fact that these secret rewrites were contrary to any public vote or law, Congress finally adopted the rewritten Constitution in Washington, D.C., which became the proprietary law for the District of Columbia. Proprietary law carries with it the same force and effect as a city ordinance, and since the District of Columbia is not a recognized state, this
True.
ordinance was only enforceable against the residents of Washington, D.C., also known as federal foreign citizens, United States citizens, and 14th Amendment citizens.
Do you see it now? Do you get it? But what did they do? They took Washington, or really DC, because Washington's the outer area, DC is the inner, even though Washington itself is not one of our states, but there is the state of Washington, like the organic, okay, there's Washington state, which is organic, but this Washington and DC, those are territories. Well, what they did is they expanded this outside of their jurisdiction by creating an invisible overlay into America over our organic, like a cloud of mist. And you plug into it when you use the zip code and their stuff. So you become a federal citizen. Amongst them, they don't use the word federal foreign citizen, but they are foreign in relation to America. But in their jurisdiction, you're just a federal citizen. And then, of course, U.S. citizen, you've agreed to. And notice how they have the letter C here for citizen small, because they're the inferior. They go back and forth with the capitalizations on certain things and whatever else. It's kind of hard to keep track of at times. And then, of course, the 14th Amendment citizens, your slaves. This is why I don't try to get hung up on necessarily all of this. We know how to move the proper way. We know what this basically is, because it gets a little messy in here with the back and forth of which jurisdiction was this U.S. United States, or was this United States of America? Was this, but you do have to have a general overstanding. So that's what this is. But do your own research.
Citizens. These words of art were created by the 14th Amendment with the future intent to entrap us all. The 13th, 14th and 15th Amendments were amendments to the Reconstruction Act, and with the passage of the Reconstruction Act, these words of art forced all state governments and state officials into the District of Columbia as extensions of the corporate federal government. This underlying deception created another set of duplicitous governments, which pose as state governments, which are actually federal, with state officials that are actually federal officials. The residents of Washington, D.C. are actually federal foreign citizens because Washington, D.C. is not a state and therefore is alien to the American Republic.
But in the
Prior
family.
to this date, Americans residing within the states were referred to as sovereign citizens of the Republic.
Now hold on, because this is where the police use this against people. Okay, so let's take the word republic. So if it's a republic, this means to be taken away from or converted. So converted from the public is the republic. This means private. And we were citizens of the republic or state citizens. What they would normally say, so Judge Dill has this wrong, we were referred to as sovereigns, which are the citizens of the republic, not sovereign citizens. This has no standing in law. Has not been codified. What they were talking about is citizens are sovereign, and we are from the republic or of the republic, known as either nationals or state citizens. That's what it really should say here: state citizens of the republic, the organic. Floridians, New Yorkers, Wisconsinites, Californians, Arkansans.
Republic. The power of the word sovereign comes from the Declaration of Independence and God. The corporate one government fears the sovereign citizen because corporations and politicians have no power over the source of law, and sovereigns are the source of all man-made laws.
So that's why this is weird for me, because they're using this term together, and this is not a real thing. It doesn't exist in law. It has no power. Okay. The C can be capitalized for citizen, but sovereign should be S, lowercase. But I could see a federal judge using this term because they're taught this. But when you read through the Declaration, it says the citizens are sovereign. This was never construed to be a term or a status.
Laws, despite the fact that we are never provided with the opportunity to vote on the passage of any of the government's planned statutes, which were designed purely to drive and control us.
And why not? because the government is doing this for their own people, U.S. citizens, 14th Amendment citizens, federal foreign citizens, not Americans. Their laws govern their people. We operate under common law, okay? But because common law is not prevalent these days and the government throws around their stuff, I'm not saying that you can just run around and do whatever you want to do and ignore them. You still cannot break, the law or rather do crimes, but this pulls you into their jurisdiction, and the state has their statutes and jurisdiction. This is why we learn to create our own things and operate within there. Why do you think when one of these little priests or whoever else do inappropriate things, they're not rotting in a normal prison? Because they're under the Vatican, essentially, depending their corporations, jurisdiction, and laws operating here. Foreignly,
Us.
but with American sounding names of some of their churches and places.
Us. Statutes are written and passed by the Congress as though they were a king and kingdom of America. As an elector, is that what you voted for at every national election? Contrary to popular opinion, the 14th Amendment did not free anyone but rather enslaved everyone, except for a list of 300 influential families who were granted immunity from the 14th Amendment and can be found in the Congressional Record of 1865, which gave them diplomatic immunity. The 14th Amendment did not initially make everyone a 14th Amendment citizen nor grant any special rights or freedoms. E.g., the Bill of Rights. 1. A corporation is a dead legal fiction. Corporations cannot walk, talk, or make decisions. They are defined by a piece of paper in a safe somewhere called a charter. They have no soul to save or body to incarcerate.
Which is why you cannot find the charter for the United States Corporation or certain other places. So think about this. I'm gonna take you guys up a level. I'm gonna take you guys to level 5 for a second. All right. This is level 5 is usually where I hang out at, right before you cross into murky waters. That means every state of has a charter somewhere in somebody's safe. They own that or a set of board members that you'll never see, touch. Essentially, we're never even supposed to know about or think about because they don't want you to destroy it. I'm assuming that would be a very bad thing. And don't worry, their secret is safe because you guys will never ever find out who owns what and where. You're a little too late to the game. I don't even know. Once again, level 5.
Page 33 of 94. The Great American Adventure. What it succeeded in doing was to make all public officers and people in residence within the District of Columbia a 14th Amendment citizen, aka United States citizen and federal foreign citizen, and provided for a bounty enforceable against them for the non-payment of the public debt, which was later changed or coined by Congress as the national debt. The public debt or national debt belongs to a private corporation named the Federal Reserve. This bounty could not lawfully be enforced against anyone else because everyone residing within the states was still a sovereign American citizen of the Republic. The word sovereign is derived from the law of kings, meaning that the source of law is derived from the king and therefore the force of law can never be enforced against its source.
So that is who we are when we're in the private. We are sovereign as state citizens. Guess who this national debt, guess who they owe? They owe us. They owe us, the people, the sovereigns. They owe us. They are debtors. We are the creditors. That is really what it is, right there.
Source: As sovereign citizens of the Republic, we are the king and source of law, and therefore the force of law cannot be enforced against us, except by us and not by any government.
Unless you do something criminal, then you waive your rights. Everything that's just code is not, we're not party to it. I never signed any contracts or anything saying, hey, yeah, I'm going to be party to that. They'll say, well, you're a U.S. citizen. Don't use that dirty word with me. So what they do is when you go out there and do U.S. citizen things with your, driver's license and bank accounts and U.S. benefits and whatever else, those actions allow them to assume that you are in fact a U.S. citizen.
Government. If there isn't some truth in what I write, why would the federal government exercise such pains to facilitate this complex political conundrum and fraud? This also explains why every law is civil, even the ones defined as criminal are actually civil. Contracts can be enforced against everyone, including the king. By the third constitutional rewrite, we all unknowingly became a 14th Amendment citizen by our consent and became the collateral property of the corporate United States government, which once again is the King and Queen of England, the Vatican, and the Sabbatean/Rothschild royal family faction.
Now, this is not true. This is not 100% true here. What they did was they created a way that you could elect to be regarded by your consent to be collateral property or to be taxable by you claiming to be a U.S. citizen. They opened the door. They said, look, we know that you guys are state citizens and sovereign, but if you guys want to, by law, we'll let you guys allow yourselves to be construed or considered, regarded as a U.S. citizen or a federal citizen or a 14th Amendment citizen instead of a state citizen. You can join the gang. You can get in the water. What's that, Mr. Sean Combs? Oh, yeah, the water's fine. Come on in, Playboy. Can't stop, won't stop.
Faction. Our lives, our destiny, our children, our credit, our labor, our freedom, and all we perceive to own, would be and has since been leveraged against the unlimited spending practices of that body politic. Our money was once backed by gold, and after 1933 it read, backed by the good faith and credit of the American people, and now it promises absolutely nothing because now it is all just fiat money or counterfeit, which has no ascertainable value. Note: every time you complete a government form or tax return, you are asked to check a box indicating that you are a United States citizen, meaning a 14th Amendment citizen, under penalty of perjury. You should be checking the box that reads, Alien of the United States instead, because we are not residents of Washington, D.C. or the territory of Puerto Rico, Guam, or Samoa. Unless employed by the government, we all are alien to the federal government and not their corporate property. Again, this is done to entrap us into reaffirming our consent that we are their corporate property and subordinate to the parent corporation, government, and if you try to recant that admission, you are guilty of perjury. Ingenious, isn't it? Page 34 of 94. The Great American Adventure.
All right. That is where we're going to stop for the day. I'm going to do a second part and um, maybe a third part. But for right now, that is it. That is it. That is it. We will pick up with the Reconstruction Act of 1868. All right, let's see here. Stop sharing. All right. And I promise to, in the next video, I will not be all dreamy looking. I'll clean the lens. But anyway, guys, so that is interesting information, is it not? Do your own research. We hold no liability or responsibility for the information contained here. Everything is satire, extracted materials, and the informational public domain. Do your own research. I just find it interesting. It's interesting to hear other people's thoughts on events and whatever else. I'll talk to you guys later. Have a great night. Take care of yourselves. Bad Wolf Love. If this is your first time here, welcome to the tribe. Hit that bell, subscribe. Have a great night.